Okay, Parisa, thank you. We're back on YouTube. We were following up with our questions about the Parashara Shastra.
Yes.
What are we up to?
Okay, so last week we left off at the question of kuja being sattva. And right. You said you would look into it and we discuss it this week.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yes. Okay.
All right, so let's start with the actual Sanskrit of the thing, which is what, the 12th? And the 12th text in the 3rd chapter of the Parashara Shastra. It says this, and I think, as I just mentioned to you before, I think this is a really, really cool verse. Do you remember when you took a level 1 intensive course?
Yes.
I started off the course by giving a Sanskrit sutra that I made, right?
Yes. Yes.
About I can't even remember what it is right now, but people thought it was cool that I made a Sanskrit sutra for the planets, right? This verse that you're examining from Parashara Shastra is the basis for that.
I see.
This is where Parashara Shastra is kind of doing the same exact thing.
Okay.
He's giving like a memorable Sanskrit thing to get the meanings for the planets, at least for a couple of them. Maybe 13 has other ones. So, all right, so the 12th text says, sarvātmā cha divanātho. So that part says that the divana, the Lord of the day, that's a name for the sun, is the sarvātmā. So and we talked about this in our last one, like the sun is the essence of everything, the essential core of everything. That's what the sun represents, the essential core of anything. And it says manaha kumuda-bandavaḥ. The mana is the kumuda-bandavaḥ. Kumuda-bandavaḥ is the name for the moon. We talked about that last week, right? The friend of the lotus flower.
Yes.
Is the mind. So the moon is all the reflections and the desires and the thoughts. That's what the moon symbolizes. Then he says, where your question comes up, sattvaṁ kujo. Means that kuja is the sattva. Mars is this thing called sattva, and that's what your question is about. Like, but I thought Mars was a cruel planet. Sattva is not cruel. Or I thought, Mars, sattva is very calm, but Mars isn't calm at all. So what does he mean? Sattvam kuja. So then let's just finish up the verse to make sure there's not any other important words that might pertain to Mars, which there's not, but let's to make sure about it. He says, budhaiḥ, prokto, budho, vāṇī-pradāyakaḥ. That Buddha or Mercury is said to be, which is an interesting play on words. It's not a play on words, but it's just he's putting in this extra word because he's got a couple extra syllables. So he says Buddha is said or known to be the buddhi, the intelligence. What's the special characteristic of the intelligence? That it's vāṇī-pradāyakaḥ. It's the thing that allows creatures to communicate in words. That's what the intellect is. It's the thing that allows creatures to communicate in words. Vāṇī means words. Pradāyakaḥ, the one who enables speech. The thing that enables speech is intelligence, and that's what Mercury represents. So now we can get the context. Now, what is he talking about with sattva being Mars? So I think as we began to mention last week, it's a very simple word, sattva. Sattva, tattva. Any Sanskrit word that has a TVA at the end is like an English word that has a ness at the end. Kindness, gentleness, hardness, softness. When you put a tva at the end, it gives that ness to the word. So really, to know softness, what the word softness means, you just need to know what the word soft means, right? So same thing with sattva or tattva. You just need to know what the word sat means. And then you'll know what sattva means. It's just satness, tatness. Tattva is tatness. So sat, what does it really mean? Sat means real. So something that exists is sat. Basically, there's three energies that compose reality: sat, chit, and ananda.
The second one was
Chit, which is like Veda or Vit, which means to know. There's Sat, which is like there's an ability for stuff to exist. There's ability for things to be real, to be tangible. That's Sat. And then there's Chit, which is the ability to experience it, to know about it.
Okay.
So there's not just objects, but the objects are there with experiencers of objects, and like this, inseparable. The two energies are inseparable, the object and the observer of the object. And then the third energy is ananda, which is happiness. Okay. This is what the knower of the object, Chit, gets from experiencing the object, Sat. They get ananda. It produces ananda. The having something to experience and being able to experience it produces happiness. So those are the three fundamental threads that make the tapestry of everything that we experience in reality. So Mars is the Sat part. Sattva, the realness.
Okay.
So that's very important for understanding Mars, because Mars is super practical. That's one of the key traits of Mars, is very practical. Like, it doesn't decorate. Mars doesn't decorate. And the room that Mars lives in is not decorated. It's very practical, though. It's very useful. The clothes that Mars wears are not decorative. They're just useful.
Mm-hmm.
They're practical. He's got a pocket where he needs a pocket.
Right.
He's got he's wearing a scarf because it's cold, not because it looks good. It's practical.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the important implications of the word sattva, is very practical, very real. Also, Mars is interested in real stuff. It wants acquisitions. It's not theoretical. It's not fanciful. Mars is not fanciful or anything like that. It's very realistic. But we looked up sattva in Monier Williams' dictionary, right, to see what are the scholastically accepted English translations for sattva. So what the fundamental thing that it says is the true essence, the being, the actual core thing that exists is the sattva. But because of that, there's connotations to the word. Because the word sattva means the true essence, the real fundamental core thing of that exists, then it has very implications. It means like a soul. Right? That's what a soul is. It's the core of a being that you can't remove. I always think it's funny in science fiction or fantasy stories when somebody says, "My soul has been stolen." Right? Yeah. If your soul has been stolen, you can't steal your soul. The soul is not a separable limb. If your soul is stolen, you go with it. That soul is you. You can cut off your arm. You can even rip a soul out of a body, but you can't. If you separate a soul from the body is not lost of the soul has lost the body. But consciousness is the soul. So sattva then means soul. So is Mars spiritual? No, because it's practical. Mars is very practical. Okay. But it spiritual means the core thing, the thing that's really the thing that really matters. That's what Mars cares about. The thing that really matters. It doesn't care about frills. It doesn't care about decorations. It cares about what really matters. Does this thing work or does it not work?
Okay.
So in that sense, it's an essential planet. It gets to the essence. Now, what does a soul provide to a body? This is the third connotation of the word sattva that Monier dictionary gives in English, is that it's the source of vitality. Right? Sattva is the source of the vitality. Because that's the role that the soul plays in relation to the body. Is that it's the source of energy. It's just like a battery in my computer. The battery is like the soul of the computer. It's the sattva of the computer. Because if that thing goes out, then nothing else works. Right. I might have a great CPU, fantastic RAM, greatest software, all that stuff. No viruses, everything's clean. But if the battery is gone, nothing else continues to operate. So the battery is the sattva. It's the core essential component of the thing, and it supplies the energy to it.
Okay. So are we talking about this more of the quality of the sun right now, or of Mars?
Right. So we're talking about Mars.
Okay.
But it's very, very interesting to see how Mars and the sun are very similar, right? Because they're both red. They're both fire. They're both masculine. They're very similar. They love to be together. Sun and Mars like to be together. They like each other's signs, especially Aries. I mean, Sun loves Aries. Mars likes Leo. Scorpio is a wet sign. It's a little bit of a second best, but they love each other's signs. They like each other, Mars and the Sun, because they have so much in common. Well, it's so interesting that this verse says that the Sun is Atma and Mars is Sattva.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So these are two ways of referring to a soul. Atma refers to a soul, and Sattva also refers to a soul. But obviously they're slightly different, otherwise they wouldn't be two different words.
Okay.
So Atma is like the core identifier is the Atma. That's what Atma means. You know, like if you have an ID number, a serial number, a barcode, that's the Atma of the thing. Like if I buy a defective toy and then I try to contact the manufacturer and give it back, they want to know the identifier of that particular toy that I bought. They want to know the Atma. What's the Atma of that thing? That's what Atma does. It gives you a unique specificity. Atma is a unique specificity. Now, spiritually speaking, the Atma means the soul, but it means the soul, it means active consciousness. The soul is consciousness, but if it's inactive, then it's not Atma. It's just something called Brahman. But if it's active, then it perceives something. So it can be differentiated from the thing it perceives and other perceivers. So that's why it's called Atma. The soul is called Atma because it's a differentiated bit of Brahman. It's a differentiated part of consciousness. But here in astrology, what the sun is talking about the identifier. That's what the sun signifies. The core thing about the person or thing that identifies it. Okay. So, you know, sun represents your sense of self. What is it that identifies me? Who am I? How confident? How much do I like who I am? How much do I have a healthy self-identification? Do I really identify with who I am, or do I feel like I'm not really who I am? Do I feel uncomfortable with who I'm supposed to be? It's all kind of issues related to the sun. Can you hear the rain?
No.
We got a big rain. Yesterday, I was walking home with the kids, the first graders. I was the first grade, and they were telling me, tomorrow's going to be a big rain. Tomorrow's going to be a big rain. They were right. They're good astrologers. They predicted it.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Is it monsoon kind of rain or just heavy rain?
It's this time of year, you'll get, it's not a rainy season yet, but we'll get like a week
of rainfall
where it rains really heavy. Our rainy season is different from India's. India's rainy season is summer first, then rainy season. But our rainy season is rainy season first and then summer, and that makes our summer really, really humid.
Yes.
So it's a really sticky summer that we get.
Right.
All right, so back to the Sun and Mars combo. It's very interesting how they're very similar planets, and this shloka is also giving them very similar wording. It's saying that Sun is Atma and Mars is Sattva. So Atma means the core of the thing that identifies it. Sattva means the core of the thing that energizes it.
Right.
Right, so Sun represents the core of you that forms your identity. Mars represents the core of you, not the core that forms your identity. The core that gives you energy. The energizing core.
So that's what you meant about the vitality earlier.
Right. So that's another important thing about Mars. The important things that we take away from hearing that Mars is Sattva, we take away that Mars is an essentialist, a realist, practical planet, and an energetic planet, a source of vitality, a source of inspiration. That's what Mars does. It gives you, without Mars, if Mars is very weak in a person's chart, they don't even feel like waking up.
Okay.
They have nothing to, they have no ambition. Mars is a source of ambition, energy, drive, etc.
Okay.
Right, so that's what he means by Mars is sattva. Just realize, if you just remember, he didn't say sattva guna, he just said sattva.
Right.
So then you don't have to try to figure out how Mars can be calm, sattva guna, or how Mars can be contemplative. He's not talking about sattva guna, he's talking about sattva.
Well, that was a very important distinction you made for me last week, because I was just relating everything to the gunas, and then this text goes on and in some parts that don't make sense.
Yeah. So either the author has to say sattva guna, or the rest of the context has to be talking about gunas. Then sattva means sattva guna.
Okay.
But here, there's no mention of gunas, and he just says sattva without sattva guna, so he's not talking about sattva guna.
Okay.
Then I think it's very interesting that he says Mercury is the intellect, which gives you the ability to speak.
Yeah, I was going to ask you why Mercury is grouped with these two guys in this.
Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, that's a conventional order. He's just going in order.
Order. Okay.
Yeah. Remember, that's a weird order. It's not, I grew up in a regular Western school this time around. And I just, the way I learned my order of planets was Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus. Actually, they didn't even count the moon as a planet, right? I just learned Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, etc. And I memorized.
No sun either.
Huh?
No sun either, because that one was a star.
Yeah, but they would teach me the sun because they had the sun as like the middle of all the guys.
Yes.
So I was really into it was something past life also. Like I was really into astrology when I was in elementary school. Not astrology, astronomy. When I was in elementary school and like junior high school, I used to make like planets and hang up like cardboard colored paper cutouts of planets and hang them in my garage in the right order and stuff.
And told me stories about Carl Sagan, right? You used to watch that.
God, I love Carl Sagan. Yeah, he was my hero.
Yes.
Yes, so that's a modern astronomical ordering, but it's also an ancient ordering based on speed. The speed of the planets is, well, the sun is the middle. That also shows that they knew the sun was the middle in some way, because it's not the fastest planet, but they put it first. Sun, moon, and then the speed around the sun is the moon will go fastest, Mercury next fastest, Mercury next, Venus next fast, Mars next, etc. So that kind of order is more like the one that we're familiar with, but the classical astrological order, and it's difficult to say why they have this order. There is some pattern to it, but it's not like a straightforward, simple pattern. The classical astrological order is just the order of the weeks. Our weekdays are based on it.
Yes.
So it makes it not too hard to forget, not too hard to remember. Sun, moon, then it will be Tuesday, Mars, Wednesday, Mercury. And then we're using Norse words in English, so it's a little not so helpful. If you go to a Latin language like Martes, Mercoledis, Jovedis, Venerdis. So then it's clear, like Mars is Tuesday, Mercury is Wednesday, Jupiter is Thursday, Venus is Friday, and then Saturn is Saturday. So that he's just following his order. Do you have 13? Do you have text 13 on hand?
Text 13.
The next text?
Just 1 second.
He's probably just going to go to the next planet.
Yes, I do. And then this whole ordering of it, and it's actually section 14, I think. I don't know if that's the justification for why it's been ordered the way it has, but section 13 is about Mercury being the giver of language, both spoken and written, and language being intimately connected with the intellect, and then Jupiter being the blissful knowledge.
So he goes to Jupiter after Mercury, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so he's just going in order.
Okay. Do you see section 13? Because I have a bunch of random notes I wrote on top.
No, what do I have to scroll down a lot more?
To page 35. Bottom of page 35.
Oh, yeah, here we go.
You see it?
Let's see what he says.
Okay.
Here he says, devajño, jñāna-sukha-dābhṛgur. So it's a little unnecessarily epic to translate it as the bliss of knowledge. But he says, also the name that he's choosing for these guys is interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
He called the sun the divanātha, which is, it's not, so the meaning is not just coming from sarvātmā, it's also coming from divanātha. So if you want to understand this very compact definition of what the sun represents, symbolizes at its root, you have to consider both words. The sun is the essential core identifier of anything, which gives it the divanath, the ability to be strong. Natha means a master, strong. And diva means bright, brilliant, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then for moon, we talked about last week, kumuda-bandavaḥsattvaṁ, the friend of the lotus flower, we talked about that last week. Kuja means born from the earth. So it's very, very, it's telling you there, don't take this sattva thing to mean something far out and philosophical or something. Kuja is very practical.
Yeah.
It's earth, it's tied to the earth. Kuja is a practical, earthy planet, but he's the planet of sattva, which is going to give you energy. So it's like a volcanic energy. This is the sattva of Ku. The energy source of the earth is like this volcanic energy. And then his name for Mercury is a commonly accepted, widely used name, Buddha, but that's also very important too, because he says Buddha is Buddha. Mercury is, it's like in English, if we named Mercury intelligence. That's what how it works in Sanskrit. Intelligence is intelligence. The planet intelligence represents intelligence. Then he comes down here to Jupiter's thing, and he says, Devajño. So he's saying the Gya, the knower amongst the devas, amongst the gods. That's his name for Jupiter, the Devajño. The knower of gods, the knower of divinities. Make sense?
Yes.
So Jupiter's flavor then is about knowledge, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a particular kind of knowledge. It's a deva knowledge. So other planets may be about knowledge too, besides Jupiter, but Jupiter has a knowledge of like deva, things which are good, things which are helpful, things which are bright and expansive and better and good stuff. It's like positive knowledge.
Okay.
Devajño. And what was his other word? I flipped off that page for a second. Devajño, jñāna-sukha-dābhṛgur. So then jnana means comprehension, right? Or knowledge. Jñāna-sukha. Sukha means happiness, not bliss.
Okay.
Ananda is bliss.
Right.
Sukha is ordinary just happiness, pleasure. Sukha contrasts with dukkha, pleasure and pain, happiness, unhappiness.
Sorry to interrupt. Are we on 13 or 14?
I don't know. Let me check. This is 13.
13. Okay. Okay. Yes.
He's going to give other names. He's going to, in 14. So these names are so important.
Mm-hmm. So many.
Not just in astrology, but in any Vedic Sanskrit text. Like in Puranas, the names of things are so important. Mm-hmm. If you don't unravel the name of thing, you can't even tell what they're talking about. It just sounds like a story. But when you unravel the name of what they're talking about, it's not just a story. Now it's something that actually logically makes sense. So he's the jñāna-sukha-dābhṛgur. So he gives knowledge. Da means to give. As a suffix, da means to give. So he's the jñāna-da. He gives knowledge. So Jupiter is like a teacher. But it's sukha. Jñāna-sukha-dābhṛgur. Deva. So that word deva and the word sukha are positive, bright, nice.
Yes.
So teachers are not always bright and positive and nice. Teachers can be really stern. Teachers can be strict. Teachers are always correcting you. Teachers can be a real pain.
Right.
But that's not Jupiter's way. Jupiter's way is positive.
Okay.
He's jñāna-sukha-dābhṛgur. He gives you knowledge through pleasant, pleasurable, positive experiences.
I see. Okay.
That's why that word sukha is used. And then what's the next one? What's he going to say about Saturn? All right, so after Jupiter, he goes to Venus, because Venus comes next in the traditional order. So what he says for Venus is Bhrigu, in the translation says Bhrigu gives vitality. Bhrigu, vīryo-pradāyakaḥ. It's just like Mercury was the vāṇī-pradāyakaḥ, Venus is vīryo-pradāyakaḥ, which is also weird. I mean, this is an interesting one. What was the English again? Bhrigu gives virility. Good, pretty good translation. You could say heroism, but it would be, you have the wrong connotation here. Venus is not a heroic planet. Mars is the heroic planet. There's a reason why the word vira means hero, because a hero has tons of virility. Vira, virility, it's even cognate, actually. It's a very good translation, virility. Virility means fertility, but also it means like just power. Venus is also a source of power like Mars, but it's the fertile source of power. Mars is like the fiery, sharp source, explosive source of power, and Venus is the feminine source of power. Mars is the male source of power, and Venus is the feminine source of power.
Right, okay.
It's weird because in our culture these days, when we hear the word Vira, we have a masculine feeling to it. Like a hero is a male figure, but it's not so in this Sanskrit thing. There's no necessity that Virya is female, is masculine. It can be masculine or feminine. So what Venus gives is a certain kind of vitality, which is called Vira. Vira is the brightness in your senses.
Okay. Is that the same thing we were once talking about, the Rasi that's related to Venus, or no?
The Rasi that's related, the sign that's related to Venus?
No, what was that? The word is R-A-S-I?
Rasa?
Rasa? Is that?
Rasa.
Or that's not?
Yeah, it is related to it. Like Rasa, remember Satchidananda we were talking about earlier? The three aspects of existence. So Rasa is the Ananda.
The Ananda, okay.
The Rasi, or the Rasika, is the chit, the observer, the experiencer.
Okay.
And then the Rasam is the object.
Okay.
So what Venus is giving really is the chit.
Okay.
The ability, the vira, the virility, is the power of the senses. So that's why Venus is an intelligent Brahminical planet, because it's giving the ability to perceive. Just like Jupiter was giving knowledge, Venus is giving virility. What is virility? Virility is the acuity and accuracy and vitality in your senses. So for example, like if you have a very good Venus, your eyesight will probably be very good. Your hearing will probably be very good. Your sense of touch, your sense of smell, your sense of taste will probably be very refined and accurate and sensitive. Well, what can you do? What do you do with your senses? You gain knowledge of the world through your senses. That's what senses are for. They're called jñāna-indriya. They're the tools for acquiring knowledge. So Venus is also a knowledge-oriented planet. But it's not like textbook knowledge. Like Jupiter is more like textbook knowledge. It'll teach you a mantra, it'll teach you a shloka, it'll teach you a theory. Venus is very experiential knowledge. The ability to experience the world and understand it is the Venusian trait.
Okay.
Or
and
just
that's related to the arts or what have you.
Yeah, the clarity and the acuity required to be able to move a paintbrush the right way, or tell the difference between a C sharp and a C sharp that's out of tune. You know, without Venus, you can't tell the difference between a note that's in tune and out of tune. I see that all the time with people. I'm poor at it compared to my wife. My wife's got such a good clarity on the notes, but compared to most people, I'm like, can't you tell that that's not in tune? Like, no. What should I do? Go higher? Go lower?
Right.
Because I make my English students make songs, so I kind of force them to learn a little music too at the same time. but most of them don't have very good musical skills.
Mhm.
All right, so yeah, we got up to Venus, right? So Venus makes a Bhrigu. Why Bhrigu?
Mhm.
There's a mythological reason, like there's a plain reason why, because this planet Venus is thought of as a descendant of Bhrigu.
All right. Okay.
But let's look up the word.
Okay.
Maybe we might have to do this in another. Come back to this, because this is obviously going to be a really deep word,
Okay.
right? Because it's a name. It will be hard to unravel it.
So do you want to skip it for this week? And then
Yeah,
we
let's
can...
skip the Bhrigu.
Okay, so I'll make that. Can we do that next week?
Yeah.
At it? Yes? Okay. I'll note this.
I need to think about it.
Okay. We'll do that.
And then he says, the Rishinams, they say this. The wise people, they say this. It's prokto. So again, he's just filling up syllables on the line, because he needs 888. But then he's going to wind up with Saturn.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to bother with Rahu and Ketu, right? Probably
No.
doesn't mention them because they're not really part of the original canon.
Not here, no.
So what does he say about Saturn? He says, proktoś, shanischa, shūnuś, duḥkha-dā, proktoś, chaya-sūnuś, duḥkha-dā, chaya-sūnuś. This is interesting. So he says, this is what the wise people say about all these planets so far. And what they also say,
Mm-hmm.
that the son of shadow, chaya-sūnuś, is the duḥkha-dā, the giver of grief. Remember, Jupiter was sukha-dā.
Mm-hmm.
So Jupiter and Saturn, they make a very important pair. Mars and Venus make a very important pair. You can understand the two of them as two sides of the same coin, masculine, feminine. And Jupiter and Saturn make a very important pair, positivity, negativity.
Okay, yes.
So Jupiter's trait is to give positivity, sukh, and Saturn's trait is negativity, dukkha.
Okay.
And he's called the chaya-sūnuś, the son of the shadow.
What does that word mean, son of shadow?
Yeah, you know why?
Because he is son of...
Like
sun.
literally. Yeah, well, literally, the sun married clouds and shadows.
The sun.
In Vedic thinking, the sun has two wives. One is clouds and one is shadows, or mist or something in shadows. The shadows then made a further shadow of herself when she needed a break. She needed to go back, get a little time away from her hot husband. The sun is like very hot. So she made a duplicative form of herself. You know the story? You never heard the story before?
You told me about the hologram, yes.
Yeah, so she made like a hologram of herself, and then they had a child, because the son didn't know, and then Shani was born.
Mm-hmm.
So he's the son of shadow, but that's the story. But it's very interesting that the implication of the word son of shadow is very interesting too. Mm-hmm. Saturn's a dark planet. Literally, Saturn's a very dim planet. It moves very slowly. It's a dark planet. Jupiter is a brighter planet. Devajño. Deva is a bright word.
Mm-hmm.
So here he's giving, after saying that Jupiter is Deva, bright, then he says Saturn is chaya, dark, shadowy. So what kind of things are born from shadow? It's the difference from Jupiter. Jupiter is all positive, sukha-dā and deva, where Saturn is dukkha and chaya. Jupiter is happiness and brightness, and Saturn is shadow and sadness. So they're an important pair.
In comparison, or they actually have some sort of a relational dynamic that
they actually have, well, both, but they have a relational dynamic. Okay. But But in comparison, I mean, what's nice about trying to learn the planets is don't just learn each one separately. Learn Sun, Moon, and Mercury as one set, because they all describe the inner workings of a person. Then learn Venus and Mars as another set, because they're almost exactly opposite on each other on every theme. And then learn Jupiter and Saturn as your next set, because they're almost exactly opposite on everything. Like, if you just learn that Saturn represents this, you already knew that Jupiter represents the opposite thing.
Right.
On almost every case. Although Saturn represents tons of stuff, some of the things don't always relate to Jupiter. And then also Rahu and Ketu are just opposites.
Yes. Okay. Makes sense.
Is that all cleared up?
Yes.
What else you got? Other questions?
Questions, and we're almost running out of time. Can we actually go through 14? Because earlier you said about the order of the planets. It seems to be giving some sort of a narrative here. Or maybe I'm mistaking this for something else. If you could clarify, is this why there's that?
No. The order of the planets is some weird thing with a pentacle and stuff like that, like a fifth from each one. And honestly, I don't think this order was originally Indian, because days of the week was not originally Indian. The original Indian calendric system didn't have weeks. They had pakshas.
I see. Which
is a waxing or a waning of the moon. In English, you got this word fortnight. A paksha is a fortnight. I never knew what a fortnight was until I got into studying this kind of stuff. But a fortnight is the waxing or waning. It's like a half a month is a fortnight. The Vedic calendars didn't have weekdays.
Okay.
Now they have this thing, they incorporate them into their religious calendars, weekdays.
Okay.
Somavar, Suryavar, all that stuff. But it wasn't there in the original stuff. They just had the titis, that 15 days of a paksha. And then they would combine that with the nakshatra.
Okay.
So anyway, there's this order there, and it seems to be some mystical thing. If you think about it, this just goes sun and moon. That's obvious. Those two should be first.
Yes.
Then the next one is Mars. Why Mars? Mars is the fastest planet that's on the outside of the Earth. That's further away from the sun than the Earth.
Yes.
Why start there and not with Mercury? Because there's 3 planets outside the Earth, when there's only 2 inside the Earth. So you're going to have one extra surplus, so start over there.
Okay.
And then after Mars is Mercury. After Tuesday is Wednesday, Mercoledis. After Martes is Mercoledis. So from Mars it goes to Mercury. Why Mercury? It's the fastest one on the inside. So it goes from the fastest one on the outside to the fastest one on the inside. Then it goes to Jupiter, the second fastest on the outside. And then Venus, the second fastest on the inside. And then it ends up with Saturn.
Okay.
How they came up with that, why they use that pattern, it has something to do with fifths. There's some explanation of it in this book, Parashara Shastra, in the section on Shadbala.
I see. Okay.
But it's complicated. I don't know why. It's not that important either.
Okay.
So what 14 does, let's read it. 14 gives, originally he said he's going to tell you about the qualities and colors and all that stuff of the planets, right?
Yes.
So now he's fulfilling his promise. And he's telling you about these planets. But what he did first was, in 13 and 14, he told you this is the most important stuff. Just, they do that. A Sanskrit text or a teacher will usually tell you, like, this is the real important thing. Get this first. Now let's explain it in various ways. They give up something called a Paribhasa Sutra, a thesis statement in the beginning. And then they go around and they explore it. But if you don't get the original statement, if you don't keep that one in mind, you're just like a dog chasing its tail around all these other things that they're teaching you. So really 13th text and 14th text are the most important texts for understanding the planets. The most important thing is to understand that the sun is the unique identifier. The moon is the source of all our emotions and desires. The Mars is the energizer. Mercury is the speech giver. Jupiter is the knowledge giver. Venus is the acuity giver, let's say. Acuity, accuracy giver. And Saturn is the sadness giver. So then he's going to say, let's explore this and see how this works in different contexts.
Okay. Do we have time for this part?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, okay.
Let's at least introduce it.
Okay. Can I just ask one question about Saturn?
Yeah.
All the other planets, as you described them right now, have a function. What is the function of sadness?
Yeah, what's the function of sadness, right? Everybody says that. Everybody says that. Remember when we were doing nakshatra classes? A lot of times we would come to a difficult nakshatra or a very like materialistic nakshatra, and somebody would be like, what's the spiritual implication of this nakshatra?
Yes.
Yeah. It's not, life is not Disneyland, and there's not everything is not spiritual and funk and pretty and good and stuff like that. Well, life is a combination of all sorts of things, but all these things have their function. But just like, if you want to be beautiful, you got to sometimes scrub your skin. So what is this like rough, scrubby thing? This rough, scrubby thing is not pretty, fluffy, nice, but it's important for beauty because you got to scrub, especially your feet. You better scrub those things, right? So that's what Saturn is for. That's what dukkha is for. It's the scrubber. And you may, why does a beautiful woman have this rough thing in her bathroom? Because you need that rough thing to scrub you. So same thing with Saturn. Why does a nice universe have Saturn in it, a bringer of misery? Because you need that to scrub off the mistakes. You have the ability to make mistakes. And then you can say, why do I have the ability to make mistakes? Because if you don't have the ability to make mistakes, you're not a person. If you you're not a free agent. If you don't have the ability to make a mistake. So if you're not a person, then you're actually useless. You're no better than an object. But we don't want to populate the universe with objects. Krishna wants to populate the universe with entities, not objects. The entities manifest the objects automatically. So the manifester of the universe doesn't just make objects, he makes entities. He makes people who can make mistakes. But that's why you need Saturn. You need the scrub to say, you're making a mistake. You need somebody to be there to say, hey, that's a mistake. It's not really the way the rest of the whole thing is it's not really in harmony with the way everything works. If you do it like that, it's fine. You're allowed to do it like that, but it's going to be out of harmony with the way everything else is working. So let me rub it a little bit. Let me scrub it a little bit to see if we can't get you to change your direction. That's what Saturn is for. That's what grief is for. Grief is like, why does if my daughter does something ridiculous or my son does something ridiculous, like he does all the time, he never puts anything away. So if I say, put this junk away, they'll go, oh, right? But what's the thing? That's Saturn. It's giving him distress. But what's it doing? It's helping him think, I don't want to get this situation again where my dad tells me to put this thing away. But I know if I leave it out, he's going to tell me to put it away because that's the way the universe is. Things need to be put away. So let me put it away. That's what Saturn does. It gives you the dukkha until you do it right. Or it shows you this is the wrong thing to do. See, this hurts. So imagine if fire didn't hurt. It'd be terrible. Think of how much more injury you would have from fire if it didn't hurt.
Yes.
So you would think, why does this nice universe have pain in it? If God is nice, why is there pain? Because if there wasn't pain, you wouldn't realize that you were doing something wrong. But then you would say, well, why can I do something wrong? Because if you couldn't do something wrong, you wouldn't be worth anything. You'd be worthless. You wouldn't be a person.
Right. The first session when we started talking about this text, you were saying that Vishnu creates entities who have their own free will, right? So you will get next to eventually turn to him. So I guess Saturn would be this turning, right?
Saturn is it's trying to turn. It's trying to make you turn, yeah. It's trying to say this way over here is hard. You can come this way. You can walk on this path if you want, but there's thorns over here.
Right.
And you can decide that you like thorns, that's fine. But there's thorns here. And it's not like the creator or whoever it is planted thorns there insidiously so that you do what he wants. It's just a thing. Like the universe is set up, the way that all of the life forces moving in the universe is in this one direction. Now there's a couple of other life forces have this free will that they want to go in a different direction. It's not insidious that it's difficult for them to go in a different direction. It's just the way it is. It's not, you know, it's not like there's an evil, insidious God who made it painful to go in a different direction. It's just the way energy works. The whole universe is moving in this direction, but a couple of life force wants to go a different way, they're going to find it difficult. But that difficulty also serves a purpose, is to get them to curve back in and go in harmony with everything else.
Yes.
So Saturn is so important in this world. Like Saturn is really the main point of this whole world. All the rest of the stuff is the frills and the decorations of the world. Oh, you get knowledge, you get experience, you get you get all this fun stuff, blah, blah, blah. But Saturn is really the one that says, yeah, you're going the wrong way. Go the right way. Saturn's the one we really need.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining that.
Thanks for asking.
That's awesome.
All right. So
Now
then we'll do 14 next time, right?
Next time, yes. Okay, perfect.
Okay,
Thank you.
These are great as always.
Thank
People
you.
are going to be excited. Should we announce your travel plans?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
She's going to go to the UAC in Chicago.
Yes, and you will be there too.
And I'll be there. We'll be there together. We can do this live. And maybe if we have any friends meet us there, we can include them in on the session, right?
That would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And I'll actually get to see you after all these times.
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
That's not a
Yeah, that's not a big deal. That'll just be a letdown.
That'll be good.
Okay.
No, that'll be good. Thank you so much for today.
Okay. See you next week.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.